Hi, I'm Janiessa Norice, and this is Define Design. As I continue my job search, I've noticed different contract roles. Some seem worthy of applying, but I've noticed I've had more questions about the process of becoming a contractor than being a full-time employee. When considering employment, contracting can seem unappealing for some. You may have limited time frames, difference in pay, and they may or may not offer benefits. With so much to consider and vague responses from businesses, I've reached out to a colleague of mine who is well versed in both contracting and content design, Tanya Martin, aka the AI Content Detective. Tanya is a content strategist, Grammarly ambassador, and founder of MS Writing Services. She has over 10 years of contracting and has worked on projects for both big tech and investment firms. In her free time, she serves as a mentor and is the creative mind behind a comedy web series titled The Smart Files. This web series explores a world where human AI collaboration takes unexpected turns. Tune in to hear how she's been able to navigate the dynamics of working within teams as a contractor. She'll share insights on navigating challenges, accessing resources, and leveraging feedback to enhance content design. Let's tune in. We're here today with Miss Tanya Martin, a content designer with over 10 years of experience. Hey, Tanya, how you
Hello, I'm
doing?
so glad to be on your show. Content design.
So
We're here about content design. What content design means to me is making the content clear and concise for the user. My fellow members will say, why are you here? I'm here to make the content clear and concise for the user.
that is a clear and concise statement of what to do and our overall objective of why we're in the room and why we fight to stay in that room. So knowing that there are so many shifts happening in the content design world right now, and some people have the affordance of being contracted and some are full-time. And I just love to talk to you about your experience in contracting for insight on how does it work? Because for someone who may be more familiar with getting hired, having their 90-day probation and all of that, they may be very unfamiliar with the idea of being a contract employee, or how do you get the most benefit out of that? Say you're facing a layoff and you have a lot of opportunities for contracts, but you don't have any opportunities for full-time. How can you leverage that for your greatest benefit? So I think we should just start with understanding our value. I think that would be a good starting point, and like building our resume and all of those things. So when going for a contract role, what are some things that you would want to add into your resume so that you can stand out?
Sure. First, let me just say contracting you can do contracting in two different ways. So you can do through a recruiting agency where you're a W-2, a regular employee through a recruiting agency, or you can be a 1099 where you're doing contracting through your own business. I've been both. It's really no different than if I were a contractor or an employee. It's the same information. The only difference is when you're actually talking to a potential client, then you would say, or if you're going through an agency, of course, they will already know that you're contracting or you're a contractor.
Okay, that sounds good. I want to highlight a little bit on the differences between being a W-2 and a 1099, just like a general overview of that. What would be the difference if you approached it as a 1099 instead of a W-2?
Sure. With a W-2, it's usually done through an agency. So you would be an employee of that agency. Sometimes that agency even offers you benefits versus a 1099. With the 1099, I'm responsible for everything. I'm responsible for my taxes. I'm responsible for paying health insurance. I am really own business. Also, I would say with the W-2, if you're a W-2, you can also get retirement benefits through an agency.
It sounds like being a W-2 contractor is somewhat like being an employee to a certain degree. Like you may be hired on by a staffing agency,
Yes,
for example, to contract for another company.
absolutely.
And that staffing agency is responsible for any benefits or retirement options that you may have available. Whereas if you're a 1099, could it go through both? It could also be a partnership with a staffing agency or with that major company, but it's kind of like a business to business relationship instead of a business to
That's a
employee.
very good question. With an agency, sometimes they'll say we're looking for 9, but I would say 10% of the time they want you to be an employee for their agency short term, because that's W-2, your contract is really a short-term employee. So even though we're using the terms employee, you're not actually like an employee of that company per se. But they
Okay.
will sometimes say 1099, but really it's rare. As a matter of fact, I've never gotten a opportunity through an agency with a 1099. It's always been a W-2.
To get into more of what you bring to the table, knowing that you're seen as a contractor, is there a big difference in your experience from being a full-time content designer and having a team and working with that team and being a part of the process versus being a contractor and coming in as the content designer and being a part of the team and being a part of the process? Could you dive into some of the differences that you've experienced and some of the things, the pros and cons of that,
Let's dive
basically?
right on in. When I'm actually on a project, there is no difference. If I'm with fellow team members, they don't know that I'm a contractor or an employee. They just think, because anytime I come on, it's like, hey, this is Tanya, she's a new worker. They use the term. So no one knows if you're a contractor or not. So as far as the process, same thing. I'm bringing the exact same resources, tools, my knowledge, everything. The biggest
Mhm.
difference of being a contractor really is almost like outside of company business in a sense. For example,
Mhm.
if you're an employee, they may tell you you only have 3 weeks of vacation. If I'm coming in when I work, my vacation time, sick time, they cannot dictate anything of that to me. However, of course, on a project, you pretty much know you're going to have to work 9 to 5, 8 to 5, something like that. But that is the big
Mm.
difference.
Okay. All right. And so since it's just your product team knows that you're just a worker, so you're just included in the process, which I think is a beautiful thing. It's less hoops to have to
Hmm.
jump through just to get the insight that you need and the assistance that you need. How do you go about calling out the problems and jumping into those projects with being a contractor versus a full-time employee would have more time to spend with the product space and the other product team members? And contractors don't always have that
Hmm.
allowance. So how do you jump in and call out the problems that you can see?
Sure. As a new person, I can tell you this. Any client project I've started on, the biggest thing that they like about me being there is I'm bringing a new perspective, an outside perspective. So even though they don't know if I'm a contractor employee, they're like, oh, she's new here. So she's going to see things way. So when I'm looking at different problems, the first thing I do is tell everyone, give me all the information that I need to be successful on this project. And then from there, it's looking at the different objectives. I can tell what's a problem here, what are the things that they're usually doing, what are the trends. But the important thing is, whether you're an employee or a contractor, they respect what you bring to the table, who you are, including you. So from that perspective, I've never had an issue as far as going in, telling a problem. The problem may be they don't want to do anything about the problem. But yes.
So when we discuss getting that insight and discovering how the problem came about or talking to someone who can help to solve the problem, how are you navigating the waters of any company that you're joining as a contractor to discover who can help me with this? Because sometimes you'll see something, you can do a walkthrough of the product and you're like, this button is not working. Okay, which engineer do I talk to discover how to get the button to work? Like, I don't
Right.
understand. And with being a contractor, they may not give you all of the team information. They're all the people that work on every part of this end-to-end product versus when you're full-time, they pretty much here's everything.
Yes.
So how do you begin that process of navigating PMs, different engineers, designers, and the like to solve the problems or discuss the issues that are calling out to you as a content
You
designer?
always have to find at least one person who's your ally, who likes you, who really wants to help you. And when you find that one person, they will tell you you need to go to this engineer, this marketing product person. So it's about finding that one, at least one person who wants to help you. And I've been doing this so long, I've always found at least one person who was like, but I'm so adorable. Like, why wouldn't I be able to find one person? So I've always helped me. But you also bring up a very good point about access. And when you're thinking about being a W-2 versus a 1099,
Mhm.
usually with a 1099, you're not going to have access to a lot of that company's tools because they really, as a 1099, you're really almost like your own boss. So they really can't control the environment. Whereas with they see you as you're the agency responsible for you. So they're okay giving you passwords, etc. So a lot of I may not have access to some things and people may have to manually give me files as opposed to me going into a system and being able to do
Mhm.
my work.
Okay. And when we discuss getting into different files, does that include like the design files or when you return content or updated strings, if you will, are you able to access the Figma files or the design files at all or sometimes, or do you have to create your own way of communicating the content that should go on the UI?
I have to figure out a way. Usually I do not have access to Figma. A lot of
Okay.
times what a worker would do is they will either give me screenshots or we will do working meetings where it will be live. I can give them input there. But as W-2, I have access. As a 1099, usually no access.
Okay, understood. So, as a W 2, and let's talk about doing these live fixes, which I refer to them as office hours often. I am not a heavy fan of those moments because it's like everyone is putting pressure on me to do my job right there on the spot with only what they've given me. And it's not that it's always difficult, it's just that when you understand that all the moving pieces, then it's easier for you to like plug and chug in the content or understand what the need is in this moment. So how do you leverage doing these on the
Oh,
spot fixes of things, knowing that they're coming to you, especially I could only imagine because as a content person being full time, they will come out of I'd have partners come out of the woodworks like, hey, can you help me with this? It should only take 5 minutes. And then 30 minutes later, we're still going back and forth over the different things. But in that space, I have the affordance, of resources, as you mentioned. And I also have the affordance of rescheduling if necessary to
mhm.
discuss things with other partners. But when being the type of contractor that we're discussing that does not have as much access, like how are you like, okay, on the spot, I'm fixing these problems kind of on a whim because I don't even have
Uh-huh.
access to company
Mhm.
guidelines yet, for example. So how do you do
Right.
that?
It's difficult. Only thing I can say is experience. So
Mm,
having 1 year experience versus more than 10 years is a huge difference because I tend to stay in the same two industries, tech and investments. So whether you're working at investment firm A or investment firm B, it's usually the problems or issues, or you have to have knowledge about investment products. So it's not easy. I will say that. Of course, being on the spot with anything is really not easy. The only good thing is just drawing from past experience, but it's not easy.
Yeah, I could only imagine. It doesn't, and the more you do it, it doesn't get easier. It's just one of those things like you really learn to, in my opinion, you learn to trust yourself in your gut and your
Mm-hmm.
instincts so that when you're saying yes, this is the decision with confidence, but also being okay with, okay, we learned something new.
Mm-hmm.
So let's switch this around, perhaps. So, another question that I'm curious about when being a part of the process, as a contractor, have you been able to be a part of research sessions or any testing or feedback
After the
sessions?
fact. So I've never been part of
Okay.
the actual research, just after the fact. Here are the results, and there we need you to do the content.
And how do you leverage the information that you found in feedback and the decisions? Because say for you can see a problem that's underlying within the feedback that is provided and the product that they're relating it to, but the business need is still the business
Mm-hmm.
need. How do you address a possible underlying issue that could exist?
Sure. Make sure the key people are involved. If it's a big
Hmm.
change, just making sure that I'm just getting buy-in from the key people. If it's they don't even know the difference in a way. Some people are more receptive, or some departments. When I think of sales and marketing, they tend to really be more, okay, this is the business. We need to get this bottom line here. So there is changing things, or me saying, okay, we need to do this more by the user experience. Whereas when I'm working with design people, the product people, it's more
Hmm.
of, it's easier sale for me to tell them, hey, we need to make this change. It's going to balance the business side as well as the design side.
That makes a lot of sense. Even as an FTE, sometimes that's the same situation. FTE being full-time employee for our listeners, but it's the same situation because the business need is the business need, and that's understood. But sometimes I've even had moments with my partners where I've had to just walk them through the process of why the business need may need to be in a different place or it may need to be introduced in a better way because it's not being understood by the user. And if it's not being understood by the user, then it serves no purpose whatsoever because they won't interact with it. But yeah, just dealing with that business side is like straight to the point, straight to the
Yes,
point.
yes,
And everything isn't so
yes.
straight to the point,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
unfortunately. Sometimes you have to do a little
mm-hmm.
dance. Sometimes you have to learn some things. And that's just the situation for us. Have you, so knowing that you get feedback after the fact and then you're able to work from there and assist with getting the product to go to its next phase, just out of curiosity, when it comes to being a contractor and working with other content designers, have you had any experience of that?
I've always been the only content designer. Yes, and I've
Right.
worked for big tech, believe it or not, big tech companies, but I can say the projects. Thinking about it, it must be that the projects were small. So I don't want listeners to, I was the only content designer at that company. Obviously not if it's big tech, but on those projects. But I can say I've never interacted with another content designer. I want to also be something earlier about saying FTE, full-time employee. If you're a contractor, it doesn't matter if you're a W-2 contractor or a 1099 as far as how that company sees you. It's really just how you're getting paid.
Hmm.
So so
Yeah.
as we're talking about this, I think it is best to say FTE versus just contractor.
I was just curious. I know in the beginning of the conversation, we had a few moments discussing the
Hmm.
differences between the types of
Right.
contractors, which has been brought to my attention since just going through the whole job hunt experience and knowing some are W-2, some are 1099, but what does that mean? Because I'm looking for health insurance. So, okay. But it's good to know that these different options do exist as we venture into these waters and navigate what's next for us, what works for us, and not always having the affordance of that information from said employer or contractor or from a simple Google search or getting on Reddit. So sometimes you do need to have these conversations to truly understand. You can be a full-time employee as a content designer or a contractor as a content designer. And even with that, you do have options within health insurance or having your own business and approaching it with that. So it really does give us more leverage as individuals, I believe, at the end of the day. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation, just so that myself and those that are seeking new opportunities know that content design is not just a one-way street. You can do it in different types of ways and in different types of industries. I noticed that you mentioned investments, which is banking is another world, but they need content designers as well. So knowing that big tech may take an approach with AI and want to shift into that, but there are other industries that do rely on our services and skill set. Thank you for sharing that information and giving us an outlook on what it's like to be a contractor in a company. How do you join the product space? How do you share your insight? All of these things were very, very helpful as people are going on and may wonder, like, what is that? Like, I know as an FTE, I've wondered from time to time, how do contractors leverage? Like, sometimes you don't have access to things, and sometimes you do, and sometimes you can only have a certain amount of access, like you can keep it, but you can't edit, for example. So how do you work around all of these things? And then navigating, I like to call it a team for allyship. Yes, you start with that one person, but because PTO is a thing, I like to sprinkle, if I can find a starting like 3, we're good. Because usually they're not all off at the same time. So if one person is out of office and I can't get that document, I have my 2 other backups that are like, oh, here it goes. That I can help you out with that. And that's good to have as a full-time employee as well, because everyone is sick. Things happen. It's not always a trip to Cabo. Sometimes people are just sick. Like, these things take place, and just being able to leverage that so that you can still show up, do your job, and be the best version of yourself is very important. As we're coming to a close with our conversation, I do want to give you an opportunity to let people know how they can reach out to you if you would like to further this conversation with anyone that is listening.
Sure, absolutely. You can go to my website at mswritingservices.com. And of course, this information will be available after the show. Or you can also just reach me on LinkedIn. And my handle is MS Tanya Martin.
All right, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Tanya, for joining me
This
today.
was great. I'm so glad I was able to share insight, and I'm just here to be a resource.
That was Tanya Martin. From our chat, we've identified the different ways of contracting employment, discussed probable challenges, strategies to overcome those challenges, and so much more. If you'd like to continue this conversation with Tanya, I've placed her information in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe on the platform of your choice. This show was hosted and produced by me, Janiessa Norice, while editing and post-production is done by Digital Sunflower. Until next time, turn your problems into opportunities.